As all of you are aware that we were discussing the concept of supply. Now, in the context of supply, I have a very interesting question for you. Let us take a scenario, let us take a question wherein assume that there is a particular commercial property which has been occupied by a tenant without the consent of the property owner. So one can say that it is an illegal occupation. So we have a question for you that in case as a property owner, you go to the High Court and you put across to the High Court that this person is illegally occupying the property. These are the property documents which I am having. Can you please request this tenant to leave the premises? At the same time, the tenant also puts across some document to the High Court and says that I am entitled to continue the as a tenant in the premises. So now the High Court says that we will go through the document and we will take some time. Now, meanwhile, when the document are under the process of review, we request the tenant to make payment of certain amount as a rent amount to the property owner. So the question for all of you is, can it be said that the rent which has been paid by the by the tenant to the property owner, can it be said that GST would be applicable on that particular rent which is being received by the property owner, and assume that the rent per month is 5 lakh rupees? So this is a question. So I will request all of you to put across your answers in the chat box. Yes, Mr. Varghese, and others also can please mention the answers. Whether you feel, whether you believe that GST is applicable on the rent which is being received by the property owner, and particularly this is a commercial rent. This is not a residential rent. This is a commercial rent. Correct. So it's kind of a damages, or it's kind of a, one can say, amount which has been granted by the court. So almost many of you are saying that yes, GST is applicable, but please note that recently the Bombay High Court in a similar case, the Bombay High Court in a very much similar case has pronounced that in such cases GST would not be applicable. And please note what the Bombay High Court said in the case of Bai Mamubai Trust. The Bombay High Court noted that this is a case of practically illegal occupation. When we are saying that GST is applicable, the Bombay High Court noted that ideally there should be a supply for a consideration. That means there should be a reciprocal obligation. There should be a reciprocal obligation between both the parties. That means one party should agree to provide something to other person. That is, one party should agree to supply something, and the other person should agree to make payment of the same thing. Correct? Now, in cases where that kind of a agreement, that kind of a understanding was not there, and this issue, the underlying issue was of a illegal occupation of a property, the High Court specifically mentioned that in such cases GST would not be applicable. So it's a very interesting and important judgment, friends, and it highlights the fact that every case, every scenario, when you are receiving some consideration, it doesn't mean GST is applicable. You will have to still satisfy the condition that supply for consideration, means the consideration received, the consideration should be received for supply. So that is still an important condition which you will have to fulfill. And that's why, friends, please note that in cases where you are receiving consideration, maybe in a similar kind of a situation, some damages, some liquidated penalties, please have a look at the judgment and then decide whether GST is applicable on the kind of damages and liquidated penalties which you are receiving. We also have another question for you. You would have seen typically in many companies, whenever a person quits a job, correct? So in such cases, typically there is a notice which that person, that employee is supposed to give. In Corona times, I don't think so anybody is going to leave the company. Rather, it would be always other way around. But let us assume that a person puts down his paper, and the notice pay in such cases, the agreement says that typically he should serve 2 month notice period. But what if that person says, I will leave the company within 1 month? So the company says, we will recover 1 month salary from your account, correct? So tell me that in such cases, when you are recovering 1 month salary from that employee as a notice pay recovery, so let us know whether in such cases GST would be applicable on the notice pay amount which is recovered from the employee by the employer. A very much relevant question, I think, for all of you, because in almost many companies there is a practice of notice pay recovery. Yes, few of you are saying yes, some of you are saying no. Friends, in this context, there is one comment which we have received from Keurji, which says that because there is no more employer-employee relationship. So he says the time you quit, you are no longer employer-employee. So naturally that exclusion which is there under Schedule 3, that will not be of help. Paraj is saying no, it is exempt or not liable. So friend, in this regard again, we would like to share with you one particular judgment, which is in the context of service tax law. But please note that under service tax law also, the provision was very much similar. The way we have right now Schedule 2, in that we have serial number 5 subclause E. Similarly, under the old service tax law, there was section 66E subclause E. Now please note that in the service tax law, rather the law was extremely stringent, because in the act itself, in the Service Tax Act itself, that is Finance Act 1994, it was specifically mentioned that service tax is payable in scenario wherein a person is refraining from doing an act, or he is not doing in that act, correct, or he is tolerating that act. So in such cases, it was declared as a service, that activity. Now please note, in the GST law, the activity, that is toleration of an act, is not declared as a service. It is rather classified as a service. So even in the times when the service tax law specifically declared that activity as a service, even in spite of that, the High Court, the Madras High Court, in the case of GET and D India, has specifically mentioned that service tax will not be applicable on notice pay recovery. This is a very important judgment, and this could be again of relevance to all of you. So based on this judgment, one can take a position that in cases where you are recovering notice pay from your employee, that GST will not be applicable. But please note, as we have mentioned, that this is a judgment relating to service tax era. The applicability of this judgment can be questioned, but in our view, the judgment which is in the context of service tax law, still, because the provisions under GST law is a bit similar, one can take relevance, one can rely on this judgment to take a position that GST would not be applicable on the notice pay amount which you are recovering from your employees. So this is one important judgment which we wanted to share. So the two judgments which were of relevance in the context of the term supply for consideration, we discussed today. Friends, moving ahead now, there is another important point also which we wanted to share. That is with respect to again section 7. In section 7, as we discussed, there are 3 schedules. Schedule 1, which we discussed, that there are 4 entries wherein it has been said that certain transaction, even when they are carried out without consideration, still they will qualify as supply, correct? And in that we discussed the entries. After that we discussed about Schedule 2, wherein we said that Schedule 2 is typically a classification based schedule, and we are going to discuss about it, but maybe after a few more slides. And then there is Schedule 3. Schedule 3 is an extremely interesting schedule. It says that there are certain activities which will not be considered as supply of goods, nor it will be considered as supply of services. Now, one of the very first item in Schedule 3 is with respect to services by employee to the employer. And in that context only, I think we just had a discussion on the notice pay recovery. But friends, please note that the GST authorities can take a view. The GST authorities can take a view that the notice pay recovery amount which you are getting from your employee, it is a service by an employer to an employee. Whereas what has been excluded under Schedule 3 is services by an employee to the employer. And that's where, based on this argument, the authorities can contend that GST is applicable, correct? But in our view, as we discussed, based on the High Court judgment also, one can take a position that GST is not applicable on notice pay recovery. Now, moving ahead, there are few other relevant entries also under the Schedule 3. The prominent being sale of land, and subject to clause B of paragraph 5 of Schedule 2, sale of building. That means there are 2 things which they have excluded under serial number 5. One, sale of land. So if you are selling a land, yesterday we discussed about that example of sale of plot, correct? So in cases where you are selling a land or piece of plot, in such cases one can take a position that it is specifically covered under Schedule 3, and because of that, no GST will be applicable when you are selling a piece of land. correct? As far as building is concerned, please note that serial number 5 subclause B talks about under construction building. That means if you are selling an under construction building, in such cases, GST would be applicable, correct, as per the schedule 2. But if you are selling a completed property, that is, you are selling a flat after completion certificate is received, in such cases, as far as schedule 3 is concerned, serial number 5, based on this entry, one can take a position that GST would not be applicable. Now, moving ahead, there is serial number 6 also, which talks about actionable claims. Friends, please note that all actionable claims other than lottery betting and gambling are outside the ambit of or outside the purview of GST. That means on actionable claim, one can say GST is not applicable. But there is an interesting question in the context of actionable claim, which I have for you. Now, in case there is a fire in your factory, correct? In case there is a fire in your factory and certain goods gets destroyed due to the fire. Now, the insurance company makes payment of 50 lakh rupees to you. Now you are receiving 50 lakh rupees for the goods which are destroyed. So can you say that the 50 lakh rupees which you have received is actually for supply of goods by you to the insurance company, and that's where GST is payable? Or you are going to say that GST is not payable? What is the position you are going to take on the insurance claim which you have received from the insurance company? Please feel free to mention your answer in the chat box. So friends, don't hesitate when we are discussing on various important concepts. Don't hesitate. Please try to share your views. Is it liable, not liable? Correct? So, yes, Mr. Varghese. Varghese sir is talking about ITC. That we will discuss separately under section 17. But your point is well taken, Mr. Varghese, that there would be some implication on ITC, but right now we are talking about the consideration which you have received, that is 50 lakh rupees. On that, are we going to pay GST? So friends, we would like to share that typically on the amount which you are receiving from the insurance company, one can say that it is an actionable claim. And as we discussed, that all actionable claims are outside the ambit of GST law. That means on actionable claim, you will not be required to pay GST except actionable claims such as lottery betting and gambling. Other than that, typically actionable claims would be outside the ambit of GST law. Now friend, that was schedule 3 for you. There are few other entries also. One entry which we would like to discuss is basically, this is called as drop shipment, correct? So when you are supplying goods from one country to another without the goods being received in the home country. For example, if you are supplying certain goods from Korea to directly USA and you are in India, so you are buying goods in Korea for 1 crore rupees and you are supplying those goods for 1.5 crore rupees to USA. In such cases, there is a transaction which is happening. You are recording the transaction in your books of account in India. Now, please note that the goods are never ever imported in India. They are directly moving from Korea to USA. So in such cases, the question would be, what is this transaction? Will this be considered as a taxable transaction? Certainly no, because you are not going to pay any GST on those goods because those goods will never ever land in India. So then the next question would be whether this transaction which you are showing in your balance sheet, that is 1.5 crore rupees sale, will it be considered as exempted supply? So friends, in that context, please note that schedule 3, serial number 7 and 8 would be of help to you. In such cases, GST would not be applicable on the transaction, but at the same time, this transaction, one can call it a high C sale or any other terminology which you would like to use, but this transaction would not be considered, as an exempted supply as far as GST reversal is concerned. So this is one important aspect which you should take into consideration, that although GST is not payable, the transaction would not be considered as an exempted supply also. Friends, please note that there was a specific advance ruling on this aspect in the name of BASF Limited. And in that advance ruling, the advance ruling authority had specifically mentioned that this reversal, that this kind of a transaction will attract input tax credit reversal. Fortunately, after the advance ruling was pronounced on 1st of February 2019, amendment was carried out in the GST law, and that's where based on that amendment, based on serial number 7 and 8, you can take a position now that no reversal will trigger in such cases. So friends, we are now through with our detailed discussion on section 7. Now let us proceed and continue our discussion on the other part. Friends, yesterday we discussed that typically as far as section 9 is concerned, that GST is applicable on supply of goods or services or both. Similarly, when we had a discussion on section 7, there also it is mentioned that supply includes all supplies, correct? Supply includes all supplies of goods or services or both. So typically under the GST law, one can say GST is applicable if the transaction is supply of goods, or it is a transaction of supply of service, or it is a transaction of supply of both. Now in that context, we need to understand what is the meaning of the term goods, what is the meaning of the term services, and what is the meaning of the term both, correct? So let us understand. As far as the term goods is concerned, friends, please note that the term goods, it was already defined in the Constitution of India under Article 366 subclause 12. So this definition of goods is already existing in the Constitution of India, and as far as the definition in the Constitution is concerned, it says goods includes all material, commodities and articles. So please note that the definition starts with the word includes, means it is an inclusive definition. But at the same time, it says includes all materials, commodities and articles. That means what? Typically, material, commodities and article, that is typically tangible properties, would get covered under the definition of goods. Now let us understand the definition of service. The term service under the Constitution, under Article 366(26)(a), has been defined in an extremely broad manner. Because when the legislators wanted to introduce GST, they had to mention what is meant by services, and that's where when they wanted to mention the meaning in the Constitution itself, they said services means anything other than goods. Now please note, this is extremely wide definition which the legislators have given for the term service. Because understand the meaning of this definition, it says services means anything other than goods. So even practically, a immovable property might get covered under the definition of services. Although friends, in our view, one has to read the definition of service in the right context. If you say that services means anything other than goods, then we are reading the terms of a definition of service as service means everything other than goods. Please note that the terminology which is used is anything, and it is not everything. So one cannot say that everything other than goods is a service. What the legislator rather wanted to share was, they are saying services means anything other than goods. Now they wanted, if they wanted, they could have defined what is meant by services. But they were aware that services right now also, they are evolving, and in days to come also, as the share of services in the GDP is going to go up, it is going to evolve further. And I will give you an example. In earlier good old days, we used to buy a car, correct? But right now, we don't want to own a car, but rather we just want to get a ride. That is, we just want to access a facility like car through maybe Ola or Uber. And that's where the legislator, the people who were drafting the law, they were aware that the concept of services is going to evolve even further because of all these online apps which are going to come up. And that's where they say, let us define the term service in a broad manner. So, but when they have defined the term in a very broad manner, but that will not mean that it will also include immovable property, because constitutionally also all of you are aware that typically there is a transaction of goods, there are transaction of services, and there are transaction of land and building, and that is very much vocal, that is very much specified under schedule number 7, serial number 2. If you look at schedule number 7, list number 2 in the Constitution, refer to entry number 49, wherein it is specifically specified that typically taxes on land and building, correct? Taxes on land and building can be levied by the state government. And that's where one can say that there are three things which can be there. That is, transaction in goods can be there can be a transaction in service, and then there can be transaction in immovable property. In our view, friends, when we read the definition of services, immovable property transaction will not get covered under the definition of services, and services will have to read in a limited context, although the definition appears to be very wide. Moving further, the definition which are there on the Constitution, on a similar lines, the definitions have been defined under the GST Act also. The only difference is that under the GST Act, they have been elaborated a bit, correct? So you can see the definition of goods and you can see the definition of service under section 2 subclause 52 and section 2 subclause 102. Now moving ahead, friends, we would like to highlight one important aspect here, that while we understand what is goods and what is service, because typically you will say that when you are buying a laptop, it is goods transaction. But at the same time, if you are getting a laptop on rent, it is a service transaction. Similarly, when you are buying a say CD, it is typically goods. But when you are getting a lecture like this online, it can be said as a service. So typically generally we understand what is goods transaction, what is service transaction. But still there are certain scenarios, still there are certain cases wherein it could become very difficult for us to understand whether that transaction is a goods transaction or whether that transaction is service transaction. And I have an interesting case in front of you. If I ask you a simple question, and I think yesterday also we had a discussion on that. If you go and enjoy a ice cream in say Naturals, correct? I think all of you know Naturals ice cream parlor. If you go and enjoy a ice cream in Naturals shop, tell me, are you getting goods? That is, are you getting ice cream as goods, or you are getting a service? That is, they are serving you ice cream. Because please note, if you say that it is service of, they are serving you ice cream, in such cases, the activity will qualify as a restaurant service. And if it qualifies as a restaurant service, in such cases, GST would be applicable. In such cases, please note, GST would be applicable at the rate of 5%. But if you say that the transaction is actually supply of, if it is supply of goods, GST at the rate of 18% would be applicable. So tell me, when you are enjoying, when you go to ice cream parlor and when you get a scoop of ice cream, are you getting goods or are you getting service? Because if you say it is goods, rate of GST would be 5%. If you say it is supply of service, sorry, if it is supply of goods, rate of GST would be 18%. If it is supply of service, rate of GST would be 5%. So please share your answers. Paraji is saying it is goods. Vargaseji is saying goods, not a service. Kayurji is saying goods. I think many of you are saying that it is goods. And please note, friends, when you say it is goods, the rate of GST is 18%. If you call it as a service, the rate of GST would be 5% only. I'm happy to share with you that the answer which you are given, that it is supply of goods, was a similar answer which was given even by the Advanced Ruling Authority. The Advanced Ruling Authority, in the context of Arihant Enterprises, mentioned that the transaction which is happening in the ice cream parlor is typically the ice cream parlor is supplying ice cream cone to the customer, and in that particular setup, that is the setup of Naturals ice cream, there is a minimal involvement of services. That means practically there is no service which is involved, because they mention that when you go to a parlor like a Naturals ice cream parlor, there typically what happens, you don't even get a chair to sit. You go there, they will give you a scoop of ice cream, whatever flavor you like, and then you will be out of that particular shop. And that's where they mention that when you are getting ice cream from such a kind of a parlor, it is supply of goods and GST at the rate of 18% would be applicable. But at the same time, if you enjoy ice cream in a particular restaurant wherein there is a proper ambience, wherein you are getting a place to sit, wherein the ice cream is getting served on your table, wherein there is a music, correct? Wherein there is a proper serving and everything which is happening. So in such cases, it has been said that typically one can say it is a restaurant service and GST at the rate of 5% applicable. But please note, friend, that although this view was taken in the case of the advance ruling, this advance ruling was subsequently set aside. Now, friends, similar question was also put across in case of another advance ruling, that is Kundan Mistan Bhandar, wherein there was a sweet shop. I think all of you would have gone to a sweet shop before Corona times, obviously, wherein the sweet shop will give you the sweets which you want, correct? You might be wanting, say, half a kg peda. So you are getting that half a kg peda, but at the same time, you would like to enjoy a kachori there, correct? Now, when that Mistan Bhandar is giving you kachori across the counter, there the question is it supply of goods or is it supply of service? Same question. Are they supplying you kachori or are they supplying you a restaurant service? Because if you call it as a restaurant service, 5% rate. If you call it a supply of goods, then rate as applicable to those respective goods would be applicable. So in this regard, please note that this issue was reached to the Advanced Ruling Authority, and subsequently the matter again was appealed, and the appellate Advanced Ruling Authority said that you will have to split the transaction. That means you'll have to understand, are you as supplying as a Mishtan Bhandar, are you supplying to across the counter so that the person can eat that food over there only? If that is the case, they said it is a restaurant service. But in case you are supplying goods as a directly the customer is coming to you and he is buying and taking away the goods, in such cases it was said that it is supply of goods. So you can understand in GST regime, a simple issue like even buying ice cream can become a bit complicated issue because we have to understand it is goods or services. So to some extent we believe that although the GST law has made life a bit simpler, but there are few inherent issues which we wanted to get clarified or which we wanted to get resolved in the GST regime. They have not got resolved. So that's the, I would say, irony of GST regime, that even in spite of spending 3 years in GST, still we are struggling to find the answers. So friends, we talked about the fact that a transaction can be a transaction in goods or it can be a service transaction. Now let us take a further example. Let us complicate the situation even further. What if you are supplying both the things together? That is, you are supplying goods and services together. So typically, I think you would be aware that a person would be sending his car for servicing purposes to authorized service station. So when you are sending a car to an authorized service station, what is the intention you are having? That if my car is broke down, ideally once I receive it back from the authorized service station, the car should be working, correct? So your intention is that my car should get serviced. But what happens that when the car is sent for servicing, the the authorized service station, what they will do, they will put some part in your car and they will also do servicing. So there are two things which are involved. One, supply of parts, and second, supply of service. So we have a question for you. Is it a transaction of supply of goods or is it a transaction of supply of service? Or you are going to say that two things are supplied together. So that's where we have to understand, is it a composite supply? And if it is a composite supply, I think all of you are aware that as far as section 8 is concerned, in case of composite supply, we have to determine, we have to understand, is it a transaction? We have to determine what is the principal supply, and then we have to tax or we have to pay taxes appropriately. So please feel free to share your answer, or will in such cases, whether in such cases GST rate would be applicable based on the goods which are supplied and based on the services which are supplied, that is separately. So we have that section 8, we have reproduced section 8 in front of you. Section 8 reads as, tax liability on composite or mixed supply shall be determined in the following manner. Clause A reads as, a composite supply comprising of two or more supplies, one of which is a principal supply, shall be treated as supply of such principal supply. That means you'll be required to pay GST on assuming the rate of tax which is applicable to the principal supply, correct? Now you will say, what is the meaning of the term composite supply? The term composite supply is defined under section 2 subclause 30, and it is defined in such manner. Composite supply means a supply made by a taxable person to a recipient consisting of two or more taxable services, correct? Or supply of two or more goods. Now please note that in the example which we discussed, when you are sending your car for repair purposes, that person is supplying you goods as well as services. So one can say that the transaction comprises of one or more goods as well as one or more services. So there is a combination of things which is being supplied. Now it is said that when these things are naturally bundled and they are supplied in conjunction with each other, then in such cases we have to understand what is the principal supply and then pay GST accordingly. Now friends, please note that while this transaction which we discussed appears to be a transaction wherein two things are supplied together, and ideally the concept of composite supply should trigger ideally, but it is surprising to note that instead of paying GST on the transaction as a composite supply, the GST law mentions through a circular that GST would be payable on the goods part at the rate of 28% and on the services part at the rate of 18%. So one can understand that there is a particular circular, and we have reproduced the circular in front of you. This is 8th June 2018 dated circular, wherein when this particular question was asked to the GST authorities, that is CBIC, they clarified that GST would be applicable on the supply of parts at the rate of 28%. But as far as supply of services is concerned, GST would be payable at the rate of 18%. Friends, now similar question was also asked by another set of people, particularly the entities who are engaged into the activity of retrading of tire. I think all of you are aware about the activity of retrading of tire. In case of retreading of tire, what happens? That typically there is a tire which is supplied, and on that tire there is an additional layer of rubber which is applied. Please note that the rate of GST applicable on rubber is 5%, but the activity of putting a rubber on that particular tire, one can say it is a service, and the rate of GST applicable on service activities at the rate of 18%. So in such cases, please share your view that in case of retreading of tire, what is the principal supply? Is the principal supply supplying of that particular rubber? Because if you say principal supply is supply of rubber, additional layer of rubber, then the rate of GST in such cases should be only 5%, correct? But if you say that it is actually a service transaction, then the rate of GST would be 18%. So when this particular issue was asked to the GST authorities, what they clarified? They mentioned that GST at the rate of 18% would be applicable, because this transaction is actually a transaction of service, because they said that the predominant element is the element of service. Now you can understand, actually when you are sending your tire for retreading purposes, what is the main intention? What is the predominant intention? The predominant intention is to just get additional layer of rubber. So rather the predominant intention should be, one can say, supply of rubber is the predominant intention, and in such cases GST at the rate of only 5% should be applicable. But it's extremely unfortunate. It's extremely unfortunate that the circular has clarified other way around. So one can understand that when we look at the 1st March 2018 dated circular, it is said that when two things are supplied together, one should bundle it, and we should look at the principal element, correct? We should look at the dominant element, and based on that we should pay GST. But at the same time, when another entity, that is the authorized service station, they requested for a clarification, therein the authorities said that we have to split the transaction into supply of goods, and on goods supply we should pay GST at the rate of 28%, and on the services supply we should pay GST at the rate of 18%. So it's extremely unfortunate that two transactions, the GST authorities are only on their own observation, on their own understanding, are clarifying in such a manner so that they are able to collect highest amount of tax revenue. And that is the unfortunate part, that rather than sticking to the law, the clarification is going beyond law, and almost many of the people are following these kind of clarifications. So friends, now moving further, we have also another one interesting question for you, that in case of AMCs, what should be the rate of tax which should be applicable on the transaction? I think all of you are aware about the concept of AMC, that is annual maintenance contracts, correct? AMC contracts are entered into typically at the start of the financial year, and then throughout the year. For example, if you are having in your office a air conditioner, in such cases the AMC contract will say that per air conditioner we will charge you 2,000 rupees, and if there are any parts which is to be changed, we will change it, correct, as a service provider. So in such cases the question is that when you are entering into AMC, what is the supply which is taking place? Whether the person who is supplying you AMC, is he supplying you goods or is he supplying you services? Because the time you decide it is goods, you will have to refer to place of supply based on goods. The time you say it is a service, you will have to decide place of supply based on service transaction. So in this context, friend, there is a specific advance ruling which is there in the case of Sandvik Asia. Typically, Sandvik Asia used to carry out a comprehensive maintenance for their various machineries, and in that context, based on the fact of the case which are presented before the advance ruling authority, the advance ruling authority has stated that this transaction of repair and maintenance, or AMC, is typically a transaction of service. And in that context, it has been said that the rate which is applicable for services should be applicable in such cases. But please note, friend, that this is a specific advance ruling, and as all of you are aware, that advance rulings are typically only binding on the applicant and the respective jurisdictional authorities. Before you take similar kind of a decision in case of AMC, you should understand whether the facts are similar, and then only you should take appropriate view or position. Moving further, friends, with respect to composite supplies, or when two things are supplied together, there is also another one interesting advance ruling which is in the context of Columbia Asia. I think all of you are aware that when a person typically gets admitted in a hospital, say somebody is supposed to undergo a bypass surgery, in such cases what will happen? That the doctor will carry out the surgery. In case some part or anything is to be changed, for example, a stent is to be put in the heart of a person, then in such cases the doctor the doctor will put a stent in the heart of the patient, and after that some medicines, drugs would be supplied to the patient, and then once the patient is fit and fine, he will be given a discharge certificate. Now in this context, there are two supplies which are taking place. One, when a patient is admitted, he is going through a treatment, but at the same time the patient is also receiving certain goods, correct? And which are the goods we are talking about? The stent, the medicines and all. So here again the question which arises is whether on the supply of stent, whether on the supply of medicines, GST should be applicable. Because as all of you are aware that when a person is getting a healthcare service, in case of healthcare services, GST is not applicable. So in that context, in the case of Columbia Asia, as well as there are many other advanced ruling, in case of Rajagiri Healthcare, in case of Kim's Care, in such advanced ruling, it has been specifically mentioned that GST would not be applicable in case of inpatient supply of healthcare services. So please note that in case of healthcare, it has been clarified GST is not applicable because you are treating that entire transaction as one transaction. But at the same time, as we discussed in the previous slide, that when the transaction is repair maintenance of a car, the authorities are splitting the transaction and they are saying that on the goods part you should pay GST at the rate of 28% and on the service part you should pay GST at the rate of 18%. So how unfortunate that is, correct? So friends, please note that in case you are supplying both goods and services together, you should ensure that you should try to follow the law rather than the circular or this kind of advanced rulings, correct? And then only you should take a decision as to whether GST is payable or not on the composite supply. So with this, friend, we are through with our discussion with respect to the concept of composite supply. Now let us proceed with our discussion on the concept of value and how GST should be payable on value. I think, friend, till now what we have discussed, you will agree that typically GST is payable on supply of goods or services or both, correct? Then we said that if the transaction is supply of goods, you have to tax it as goods. If it is transaction of service, you have to tax it as service. If it is supply of both the things together, you will have to understand the concept of composite supply and then decide. When you are trying to classify a transaction into goods or services, you also will have to refer to Schedule 2. And at the same time, we have also mentioned that there are many advanced ruling which are there. You should also make a reference to various advanced ruling, which will be of great help to you. Also, there are few high court judgments, such as one in the case of About Healthcare. You can also refer to those kind of high court judgment also. Now, moving ahead, friend, as we discussed yesterday, that GST is payable. GST is payable on the value of supply of goods or services or both. That is what is mentioned under section 9. So that's where it becomes very much important for all of us to understand what is the value on which we are liable to make payment of GST. So in that context, let us understand what is the value and on what we are liable to make payment of GST. Friends, as far as the valuation provisions are concerned, the valuation provisions are covered under section 15. Section 15 talks about the fact that value of supply of goods or service or both shall be the transaction value. That means typically GST is payable on the transaction value. Now you will say, what is transaction value? In that context, section 15 says transaction value is the price actually paid or payable for the said supply of goods or service or both, correct? So whatever price you decide with a third party customer. So if I go to a shop and I would like to buy a laptop, the person quotes me a price of 1 lakh rupees and I agree that I will be buying that laptop for 1 lakh rupees. So typically in such cases, I'd be required to make payment of GST at the price of 1 lakh rupees. Now, please note that there is one important point I would like to mention here, that the transaction value is typically accepted provided you fulfill two important conditions. One, the supplier and recipient should not be related person, and second, price should be the sole consideration. I think all of you are aware that if you are related person, there is assumption that typically the transaction is not happening at arm's length price. That's where transaction value can be disregarded. And second, if price is not the sole consideration, that means over and above the price, you are also paying something more, correct? For example, if I go and I say I would like to buy a laptop, and the shop owner says the laptop is available for 1 lakh rupees, and you also give me your mobile which is worth 40,000 rupees. So I am paying him 1 lakh plus I am giving him my mobile which is worth 40,000. So in such cases, one can say that price is not sole consideration, and typically in such cases the transaction value would be 1 lakh which he is taking from me in cash and 40,000 rupees worth mobile which I am giving it to him. So the price would be total 1,40,000. So that is a generic example which we wanted to share, correct? But that's how the transaction will have to be determined. But in general cases, I think all of you will agree that typically the invoice value which is agreed between the two independent supplier and buyer would be considered to be a transaction value. So one can say that transaction value is nothing but invoice price, provided it is between two independent people, and second, price is the sole consideration in such cases. Now friends, there is one person who is requesting, I think he has some doubt. So I will request Mr. Keyur to type his query so we can take up the query. So Mr. Keyur, if there is any specific question, please feel free to type it out. So we'll take it up. If you'd like to share it after some time, maybe we can take it afterwards. So let's proceed, friends. Okay. So Mr. Keyur is mentioned that the query is resolved for the time being. Okay, no worries. So moving ahead, friends, we are discussing the concept of value, and as we discussed, that typically value is the invoice value on which you are required to pay GST, provided the transaction is between two unrelated party, and as we mentioned, that price is the sole consideration. Now, please note that the concept of value is extremely important, and that's where section 15 subclause 2 specifies that there are certain incidental items which you are going to charge to your customer, and section 15 subclause 2 specifies that all those items which are specified under section 15 subclause 2, they should also be forming part of the value. That means even on those items, ideally GST should be payable. So let us understand which are the items, which are the specific inclusion which are specified under the GST law. Friends, section 15 subclause 2 has 5 subclauses. The very first subclause talks about any taxes, duties, cesses and fees. That means GST is even payable on any taxes. So for example, if you hire a transporter and the transporter says, I will charge you 10,000 rupees for transporting goods from Pune to Mumbai, and I will also charge you 1,000 rupees as toll tax, because I will have to make payment of 1,000 rupees as toll charges. So ideally, because toll is a tax itself, ideally on tax there should not be a further tax which should be applicable. But as far as section 15 is concerned, subclause 2 subclause A specifically mentions that any taxes, duties and cesses, correct, which are levied under any law for the time being in force other than this act, that is means other than GST Act, then they should be included in the value of the transaction, and on that GST would be payable. So it's an important takeaway for all of us that even other taxes needs to be included as far as levy of GST is concerned, in case you are separately charging the said taxes to your customer. Second important point is there are many situations wherein what happens that yes, Meeta would like to ask some question. Yeah, please, Meeta ji, please feel free to ask. Meeta ji, you can ask the query. Please specify. Acha, Meeta ji, very interesting and very important question Meeta ji has asked about grossing up of TDS. This concept of grossing up of TDS is there under section 195A of Income Tax Act. So Meeta ji, because this question which you are asking is in the context of income tax, let us first share with all the participants what is this concept, and then we will answer about this what will happen as far as GST is concerned. So what happens, friend, that typically when you are hiring a non-resident service provider, he will say that I will raise the invoice on you, say for $10,000. Now, as all of you are aware that under the income tax law, there would be some amount which will be deducted from that 10,000 rupees, and that amount will be paid as a TDS to the government. So that person, let us say 20% is the rate of TDS, that person will only receive 8,000 rupees. So in such cases, most of the time, the service provider who is a non-resident, he says that I don't understand your income tax law, or for that matter any other law. What I want, whatever service I am giving to you, I should receive 10,000 from you. Whatever is the TDS and all that, you should take care. In my bank account, I should receive $10,000. That's it. So in such cases, what happens, that the companies who are dealing with the non-resident service provider, they make payment of 10,000 to that particular person directly, and whatever is the TDS, let us say the TDS is $2,500, that amount is paid to the government of India. So in such case, Mitaji is trying to ask whether GST would be payable under reverse charge mechanism on $10,000 or $12,500. Friends, please note that when you are looking at the entire transaction, the entire amount which you are incurred as a company is 12,500 rupees. Now, $12,500. And in such cases, the consideration which you have paid for the entire transaction is $12,500. 10,000 has been paid to the non-resident, and $2,500 have been paid to the government. And given that, in our view, GST under reverse charge would be payable on $12,500. If you look at a similar situation under India also, in case of reverse charge mechanism, say, let us say you are making payment to advocate. You will make payment of 90,000 to the advocate, and you will make payment of 10,000 to government as TDS. But in such cases, what you will do when you are calculating GST under reverse charge, you will say that I have made payment of 1 lakh rupees to the advocate, 90,000 to him, 10,000 to his PAN account or TDS account, correct? And that's where I will calculate GST on reverse charge basis on 1 lakh rupees. So similarly, even in case of non-resident suppliers, you should do the same. While this position which we are sharing with you, we are aware about the fact that grossing up of TDS is a concept which is specified under the income tax law. There is no similar provision under the GST law. So there are few companies who have taken a position, very handful, very select companies, they have taken a position that because there is no specific parallel provision under the GST law, we need not gross up, and we should only pay GST on the amount which is directly paid to the non-resident. That in our example, $10,000. But we do not agree with that view. In our view, GST would be paid on the gross up amount. Additionally, friends, please note there is a Supreme Court judgment also on a similar issue in the case of service tax law. Yeah, I think it is in the case of TVS Motors. So you can go through that judgment also. Therein also, it is said that service tax would be payable on a gross up amount. So have a look at that judgment. That also would be of relevance to you. So I hope, Mitaji, that the query is appropriately answered. In case you have any additional point, please feel free to ask. Perfect. Perfect. Let's proceed now. And we will separately share that judgment, Mitaji. You may share your email ID. We will separately email that judgment to you. So friends, moving ahead, we have just discussed clause A now. Let us discuss now clause B. When you look at clause B, you will realize the clause B talks about an interesting aspect. What it talks about? It says that any amount that the supplier is liable to pay in relation to such supply, but which has been incurred by the recipient of the supply and not included in the price actually paid or payable for the goods or services or both. In such cases, this amount should be included, and on the gross amount you need to make payment of GST. So I will give you an example. Tomorrow, maybe say after 1 month or 2 months, you hire us as a consultant, correct? And you say, Pritam, please carry out a GST audit for us, or please give us some GST retainership service. We say, okay, no problem. We are more than happy. And we travel to your location. So let us say you are from Mumbai. So we hire a car for coming to Mumbai, correct? And we agree to that car owner that we will make payment of 10,000 to you. So after the visit, we give you advice, appropriate advice, and then we charge our 1 lakh rupee invoice to you. And this car owner has given us 10,000 rupees worth invoice. The invoice is in our name, as in the name of Pritam Maurya and Associates. Now what we tell you, we say that you make payment of 1 lakh rupees to us as our fee, and you make payment of 10,000 to that car owner. Correct? Now the question would be, as a Pritham Maurya and associate, should we pay GST on 1 lakh or should we pay GST on 1,10,000? So in that context, let us read this B clause again. What it says, any amount that the supplier is liable to pay. So as a chartered accountant, we are supplier of consultancy service, correct? In relation to such supply, we use that car to travel to your location to provide the services, to do some review, correct? But which has been incurred by the recipient. So you are incurring, you are making payment of that particular amount, correct? And because of that, we are just raising an invoice of 1 lakh rupees on you. We are not raising invoice of 1 lakh plus 10,000. So given that specific scenario, serial number 2 subclause B says that in such cases, this amount of 10,000 should be included in our invoice value and we should charge GST on the entire 1,10,000. So friends, in this kind of example which we have discussed, ideally what you should do, that in case as a consultant, if somebody is charging you a reimbursement amount, you should ask him to charge GST on the total amount, correct? And you can claim the credit of the same. So that is much better rather than getting into the valuation debate of these kind of transactions. Let us proceed further. As we discussed, there are 5 clauses. So now let us go to C clause. Clause C talks about incidental expenses. So in case you are supplying, say, let us say you are supplier of TV. Now, when somebody is buying a TV worth 1 lakh rupee and the rate of GST on TV, let us say, is 28%, you also agree that if a customer gives you 3,000 rupees extra, you will do an installation for him. So how much you are charging to the customer? 1 lakh rupees for sale of TV and 3,000 rupees for installation. So the question is, in such cases, installation is a service, whether GST would be applicable on 1 lakh rupees at the rate of 28% or on the entire 1,03,000 at the rate of 28%. That is the question, correct? So should the supplier of TV pay GST at the rate of 28% on 1,03,000, or he should say that GST is applicable of 1 lakh rupees at the rate of 28% and on 3,000 it should be paid at the rate of 18% only because it is supply of service of installation. So friends, in this context, C clause, if you look at it, it says all incidental expenses, including commission, etc., should be added to such transaction, correct, before the goods are delivered. So before delivery of goods or supply of services. So typically, because in such cases, the contract will say that I will install the TV, correct? So in such cases, GST would be payable on the entire value of the supply. That is on 1,03,000, you would be required to pay GST at the rate of 28%. Now let us understand what the next D clause says. D clause talks about any interest, late fee or penalty for delayed payment of any consideration. You would have seen that there in many situations wherein you are raising an invoice on your customer for say 1 lakh rupees and the customer is unable to make payment to you within 30 days, 40 days, 60 days, whatever it is. You would have typically mentioned in your invoices that if the payment is not received by us within 21 days, we'll charge you XYZ as interest. Now, almost in India, we have seen that typically everybody mentions, but nobody charges interest. But in case, let us assume that you are charging an interest on that particular invoice. So you have raised invoice of 1 lakh rupees and you say, I will charge 5,000 rupees as interest because the payment is not received from the customer. So question would be whether on interest GST would be payable. So in that context, it is specifically mentioned that whenever there is an interest or late fee or penalty which you are charging to your customer for delayed payment of consideration, in such cases, even this amount would form part of your basic value of supply of goods or services, and accordingly you will be required to make payment of GST. Friends, please note, there can be a debate here, there can be an issue here on one particular aspect, that is, what if your principal supply is exempted? Because I think all of you are aware that GST is not payable on electricity services. Now, in case you are making you receive an electricity bill of 1 lakh, say 10,000 rupees, and you decide not to make the payment of the same, what will happen? That after a few days, the electricity company, they will, in the next month, they will charge interest to you. So in such cases, the question would be on the interest portion, whether GST would be payable or not payable, because the principal supply is exempted, correct? The principal supply is exempted. If you ask our view, in our view, if the principal supply is exempted, then in such cases, even the incidental supplies will not suffer any charges, will not suffer any taxes. But please note that the incidental supply should be intrinsically connected with the main supply. So given that if interest or late fee is chargeable on a consideration wherein the rate of tax is nil or exempted, in such cases even the additional amount which you are charging on such supply will not be subject to any GST. Now additional, a new different question. What if the rate of tax which is applicable on the supply of goods is only 5%? So thus say you are supplying certain goods on which the rate of GST is 5%. So in such cases, if you are charging additional interest, if you are charging a late fee, will you charge GST at the rate of 5% on that late fee? Or will you say that late fee or penalty which you are charging to your customer is a separate service and on that 18% GST should be applicable? Whether anyone would like to mention the answer? Anybody would like to share the answer? In the example which you are discussing, would you like to share your answer? Meeta ji saying 5%. There are few answers about 18% also. Friends, in our view, we will have to apply the rate which is applicable to the principal supply. Correct? We will have to apply the rate, tax rate which is applicable to the principal supply. In the example which we discussed, if the tax rate applicable to the principal supply is 5%, then whatever amount which you are charging on that particular product for delay of delay, say interest, late fee, penalty, by whatever name you are charging, that amount will also be added to the main principal supply amount, and on that GST at the rate of 5% only applicable. It cannot be said that this is a separate service and it should be liable to GST at the rate of 18%. I hope we have made our answer very much clear. Let us proceed now, the final and fifth item. When you look at the final and fifth item, that is subsidies. So in case somebody is giving subsidies which are directly linked to the price, but please note, excluding subsidies provided by the central government and state government. That means typically subsidies are also part of value of supply. So for example, if we are providing consultancy service to somebody, correct, 1 lakh rupees, we charge as a for advisory services. Now the customer says that we will pay you 1 lakh rupees and we will also pay 20,000 as subsidies. So what the GST law says, GST is payable on all amount including the value of subsidy, that is 1 lakh plus 20,000. Correct? So GST will be payable on the gross amount 1 lakh 20,000. But please note, in case you are supplying certain goods to the government of India, you are supplying certain services to government of India or state government, in such cases, if you receive some subsidy from the central or state government, in such cases, GST would not be payable on the subsidies which are received. Correct? So all subsidies which are received by you from central and state government, one can say GST would not be payable on such consideration which is received by you. Please note that this particular provision was also there under the service tax law, that even in the service tax regime, service tax was not payable on the subsidies which are received. So similar provision they have continued under the GST law also. So friends, till now we discussed about the fact what needs to be included in the supply. Correct? What needs to be included in the supply. Now let us understand what needs to be excluded from the supply. But before we discuss that, we have received one particular query. We'll quickly discuss that query and then we'll come to the discount part. So I'm just going through the query in case we enter into it. Yes, so Mr. Keyur is asking that if the contract entered with a particular consultancy firm or professional is of 1 lakh rupees, so we agree that 1 lakh rupees is the charge or professional fees which will be charging to you. And what happens that on the 1 lakh rupees, 90,000 is paid to the consultant and 10,000 is paid to the cab driver directly, correct? So in such cases, the question is whether GST would be payable on 1 lakh rupees. Our answer is yes, GST would be payable of 1 lakh rupees. But let us twist the fact even further. What if as a professional we agree that we will come to your premises and do the audit and we will charge you 1 lakh rupees? That's agreed. Now there is a requirement that we need to travel to your premises. So what happens? You are directly booking a cab. As a company, you are booking a cab. You are only booking our stay. And then those hotel or those cab owner would be directly billing to you. we as a professional are nowhere in the picture. In such cases, what would be the scenario? If the hotel bill and the cab bill, if it comes to be 15,000 and you are going to as a company directly make 15,000 payment to them, whether GST would be applicable on 1 lakh or it would be applicable 1 lakh plus 15,000. Friends, in our view, in such situation, GST would be applicable on from our side only on 1 lakh rupees, because we are agreeing to provide services to you for a fee of 1 lakh rupees. Correct? And second important point is, as a company, you have directly entered into contract with the supplier of rent-a-cab as well as hotel. Nowhere ever we are connected with those supplier, and that's where the value of these amounts will not be included in our invoice value. I hope, Mr. Kayur, the answer is appropriately shared with you. Mr. Paris is asking that our product is liable to GST at the rate of 12%, and in case of delayed payment, whether GST should be paid at the rate of 18 or 12%. Friends, as we discussed, that the rate of GST which will be applicable on interest, late fee penalty would be the rate of tax which will be applicable on your principal supply. Correct? So, Mr. Paras, in your example, the rate of tax would be 12% only, because your principal supplies are liable to GST at the rate of 12%. You'll be required to make payment of GST at the rate of 12%, even on the interest which you are receiving from your customer. We hope, Mr. Paras, the query is appropriately answered. We can proceed further then. Great. Let us move ahead now. So friends, till now we talked about the concept of valuation, and we have discussed about what needs to be included in the concept of value. Now let us understand what needs to be excluded from the concept of value. Friends, typically you know that discount is something which we need to exclude from value. Correct? Now discounts are typically of two types. One, discount which is given before the supply happens or at the time of supply, and discount which are given after supply takes place. So first understand discount given before or at the time of supply. So let's say you walk to a showroom, a laptop showroom. You go there, you like a laptop, you like to buy that laptop. The price of the laptop is 1 lakh rupees. You enter into discussion, you bargain with that particular shop owner, and finally it is agreed that the laptop would be sold to you at the price of 80,000 rupees. Correct? So one can say the discount which has been agreed to be given to you is a discount which is agreed before or at the time of supply. Correct? Now in such cases, the GST law specifically says that GST would be payable on 80,000 only, because whatever discount has been given, it needs to be excluded from the value of supply, because value of supply shall not include any discount which is given before or at the time of supply, provided such discount has been duly recorded in the invoice. So what you will do, 1 lakh rupees is the laptop value, 20,000 is the discount, and on the net amount, that is on the 80,000 rupees, you will charge GST as a supplier. Correct? Now, second important point, what if the discount is given after a supply is made? Now, this kind of a situation typically happens. This kind of after supply discounts are typically given to your own dealers and distributors. So what happens that if I am say HP company, or I am Lenovo company, correct? I am manufacturing various laptops. I will have my own setup of distributor network. I will have my own setup of dealer network. So what, as a company, a manufacturer, what a company will do, they supply the laptop to the dealer for a particular price. In the example which we discussed, the 80,000 rupees laptop which we just discussed right now. So in these kind of cases, what typically happens, the laptop is given by the company to the dealer for say 60,000 rupees. Now what happens that the earlier understanding of the dealer is that he will be able to assume that he will be able to sell the laptop for 75,000 rupees. So the laptop is given to the dealer for 60,000 and he will be able to sell the laptop for 75,000 rupees. But what happens many a time, for various reasons, typically after supply discount is given. Now this after supply discount is given when? One, if the dealer meets certain criteria, he is able to achieve certain turnover, correct? Or in some other cases also, for example, he is unable to meet the criteria because there is no sale which is happening. For example, right now in COVID times, there is no sale which is happening. So in such cases, manufacturer, companies, supplier typically offer after supply discount to their dealer or distributor network. So in such cases, what the GST law says, it says that the value of supply shall not include any discount which is given after the supply has been effected, if, that means there are certain conditions which have been specified. Though serial number wise, if you look at it, there appear to be only 2 conditions, but actually there are 4 conditions which are there. And how these are 4 conditions, let us understand. It says if such discount is established in terms of an agreement, that means there has to be a written agreement. Though the law or act does not talk about written agreement, it says it should be established in terms of an agreement. In terms of an agreement means what? There should be terms in that agreement. Now, typically oral terms, it would be a bit difficult to justify, and that's where we are saying that ideally the agreement should be a written agreement. So there should be agreement. That is first condition. Second condition is that this agreement should be entered into at the time of supply or before such supply has taken place. This is second most important condition, that agreement should be entered at the time of supply or before such supply. It should not happen that you are giving discount after supply has been made, and agreement is also entered into after the supply has been made to give additional discount, correct? So please ensure that in cases where you are giving after supply discount, ideally the agreement should be entered into at the time of supply when the original supply has taken place or before the original supply has taken place, correct? So it should not be afterthought practically. It should be a discount which should be agreed, and it should be mentioned in the agreement, and the mentioning of in such cases should be agreement should be entered into at the time or before the time of such supply. And third important condition is, and it should be specifically linked to the relevant invoices. That means whatever discount you are giving, it should be linked to the relevant invoices. And finally, the fourth condition, as we discussed, there are 4 conditions. The fourth condition is input tax credit attributable to such discount is appropriately reversed by the recipient, correct? So what will happen? The recipient who has claimed the input tax credit, that is your dealer or distributor, he should also reverse the credit to the extent of discount which has been given. Otherwise, what will happen? You will pay lower GST to the government, but your recipient, that is dealer, will claim higher input tax credit. So the government is saying fulfill these 4 conditions. That is, 1, the discount should be established in terms of agreement. Second, agreement should be entered into on or before the supply. Third, it should be specifically linked to the relevant invoice. And fourth, the recipient should reverse the input tax credit. If you fulfill these 4 conditions, then in such cases, you can reduce the value of your supply, and you can say that after supply discount which has been given to you will reduce the value of the original supply. Now friends, please note there can be a practical issue here for I think all the manufacturers, particularly who are having a dealer or distributor network, because you would have known that right now there is a huge challenge which almost all the dealers and distributors which are facing right now, because you know that because of corona crisis, the dealers and distributors are unable to supply goods to the customer, correct? Because last 2 to 3 months literally the shops were not working, and even if last few weeks the shops have been open, still you can find that there are not enough customers, because customers are still in their homes, correct? I think all of us are safe at home, and that's where the dealers are unable to make further supply of goods. And please note, in case of electronic item, in case of many products, typically if the goods are lying on the shelf for substantial amount of time, the value of those products will go down, because the technology will keep evolving, and the product in certain cases will approach their expiry date. And that's where the manufacturer will be required to give additional discount now in the name of, say, corona. Now there would be a question in such cases that whether the discount which is given during corona times, whether it will fulfill the condition which is there under subclause 1, correct? Because Roman 1, because what is it? It says that the agreement is entered into or at the time of such supply, and the discount should be established in terms of such agreement. Now corona, nobody knew that corona would be there, correct? Because if you have made a supply to your dealer or distributor in financial year 2019-20, correct, say you made the supply in the month of January 2020, that time nobody knew how dangerous corona would be, correct? How big the corona crisis would be. And given that, you never ever thought that this kind of corona discount would be required to be given. But at the time of supply, we were not aware. Now we know that we have to give additional discount. So in such cases, if you are giving a discount, please note that the GST authority can question the deduction of post-supply discount on this particular argument, that this kind of a discount which you are giving, that is a discount which is given because of corona, that this discount was not specifically mentioned in the agreement, and that's why a reduction in value cannot be claimed under section 15(3) subclause B subclause 1 because of non-fulfillment of condition. So do you agree, friend, with this kind of argument of the authorities? If they take this kind of argument, what would be the position you are going to take in such cases? Or we would like to ask whether any one of you is facing this practical challenge that you are going to give additional discount to your dealer or distributor. And whether you believe that this discount would be claimed as a deduction or it should not be claimed as a deduction. What is your view? The post-supply discount? Do you agree that the post-supply discount would be allowed as a discount? The corona discounts, they would be allowed as a deduction? Friends, we would like to share here. I think we are receiving some answers, but we would like to share one fact, because few of you are saying yes. While the authorities are going to say that the discounts are not specifically mentioned in the agreement, because at the time of supply it was not specified, still you can take a position based on the language which is there under section 15 subclause 3 subclause B. What the section says, such discount is established in terms of agreement. You have entered into the agreement way back with your dealer or distributor, but you are not mentioned that particular discount. What you can do, you can try to see, and after discussion with your legal team, can you add a clause retrospectively in your agreement specifying that because of corona there would be additional discount which you are going to give. Maybe if you do that, because there is no specific requirement that all discounts should be specified in the agreement, correct? It is only mentioned that such discount should be established in terms of agreement, correct? It is not mentioned that all the discounts should be specified in the agreement, because if you look at section 15(3) subclause A, it specifically talks about the fact that all the discounts should be duly recorded in the invoice, correct? But when you look at the next subclause, that is B, serial number 1, it says that it should be established in terms of agreement. It doesn't say that these discount, that is corona discount, should be specifically recorded in the agreement. So obviously nobody would have visualized, and that's where we believe that even if you amend your contracts, even if you keep a handy contract with you, wherein you are amending the contractual terms and specifying that you are going to give a corona related discount, in our view you can say that you are fulfilling the condition which is specified under subclause B, serial number 1, and then you can claim that additional post supply discount as a deduction from value. Friends, please note that whatever post supply discount which you are going to give, you will have to give it based on the relevant invoices. And I think you are aware that in the earlier days we had to issue one credit note for one invoice. Fortunately, that provision has been amended. Now section 34 as amended, it says that you need to give, you can give a cumulative credit note also. So that is one favorable change which has taken place. Friends, then there are few other provisions. I think this provision which we already discussed. Then there are few other provisions such as input tax credit which we are going to discuss tomorrow. But before we get on to that particular discussion, we would like to ask if there are any specific question with respect to the discussion which we had today. If there are any questions, now we can open the floor for question and answer session. And if there are no questions, then we will continue further for our discussion on input tax credit.